everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to do another educational video, and since it's October and the spooky season, I thought it would be good to do something kind of like scary-esque. And it is the zombie ant fungus. So, also known as Ophiocordyceps unilateralis. Okay, it is from the domain Eukaryota, kingdom Fungi, division Asiomycota, class Sordaromyces, order Hypocryles, family Ophiocordycepitaceae, genus Ophiocordyceps, species O. unilateralis. So, the morphology for these, okay? They are easily identifiable because it's reproductive structure that becomes apparent on its dead host. So, if you look here behind me, we have a picture of the ant, okay? So, typically, it is a single, wiry, yet pliant, darkly pigmented stroma, okay? You can see it there coming out of the ant's head, or between its head and its body, which arises from the dorsal region of the ant once it is dead. Now, this spore-bearing structure is a sexual structure that can be observed on the stalk just below the tip. And this complex forms the fungus's fruiting body. So, as you can see here, we have a picture of the fruiting body here coming out of the ant's head dorsal area. And yeah. And I want to be very clear that this is not coming out of the ant whenever it's alive, okay? It only comes out when the ant is already dead. So, morphology continued. So, most species of these have both a sexual and an asexual morph. The sexual being the telomorph, and then the asexual being the anamorph. Different in terms of their function and characteristics. The asexual morphs identified for Ophiocordyceps are the Hirsutella and then the Hymenstilabe. So, the life cycle for these ants, okay? Or I guess the fungi that infects the ants. While the ants are walking around, they collect spores. And these spores attach to their exoskeleton, their body, and eventually they will break through using mechanical pressure and enzymes. We will go over what kind of enzymes, stuff like that, they use later. But the spores go through a yeast phase, or a yeast stage, of the fungi where it spreads in the ant's body and manipulates the behavioral pattern exhibited by the ants. So that's why we call them zombie ants, because the spore or the fungi take control of the ant and make it move in whatever way it wants the ant to. And what it wants the ant to do is to climb up the stem of a plant and then use its mandibles, its mouth parts, to secure itself to the leaf vein. So then the ant does not fall off and it's secure. And then we have a picture here of an actual ant with the fruiting body coming out of it from the Ophiocordyceps. And you can see its pinchers there, its mandibles there, connecting to the vein of the leaf. So, the fungus then kills the ant and continues to grow its hyphae, invading its soft tissues and stuff inside of the ant. And then it structurally fortifies the ant's exoskeleton. So, it will grow on the ant, grow through the exoskeleton, into the soft tissues, and then make the exoskeleton more strong or whatnot. Then the mycelia then sprout out of the ant, securing and anchoring it to the plant, and then also into the substrate while secreting antimicrobials to ward off competition. So whenever it has completely taken over the ant, then it will start to sprout into the plant itself and or the substrate that it is on to better anchor itself, I guess. And it will also, like I said, secrete antimicrobials, which there's also microbes that would also attack the fungus or also start to break down the ant. So the antimicrobials keep off any of the competition. The fruiting body will grow from the ant's head and rupture, releasing spores. This process takes 4 to 10 days. And then the cycle continues. So the ant climbs, attaches, the spore grows, and then, the fruiting body grows, and the spores are released, which will then go on to other ants. and that takes 4 to 10 days. And then I have a picture here of the life cycle there, where you can see it coming out of the nest, getting some spores on it. It gets onto a leaf or a branch. Then it drops the spores onto another ant. So, the habitat for this fungi, okay? It is in tropical forests, but some reports of fungus in warm temperate ecosystems. It is mostly located in Brazil, Australia, Thailand, and temperate forests in South Carolina, Florida, and Japan. So it's not only in like you'd think rainforest kind of thing or whatever. It can be found kind of like there in South Carolina and Florida where it's nice and humid and warm, in Japan and Thailand, Australia, Brazil, whatnot. It can be found on the forest floor in an area with a temperature and a humidity which is suitable for the fungal growth. So, what is the humidity it needs and what is the temperature it needs? Well, it likes to be in an environment with 94 to 95% humidity. The temperature it likes to be between 20 and 30 degrees Celsius, which is 68 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. So, there are quite a few places that this could live in the world. So, the host species for this. It usually likes to stay with one host species. That is Camponotus leonardi, which is carpenter ants. Okay, carpenter ants, I'm sure a lot of people have seen. I have a picture of them, one above me here. They are like bigger black ants. And they live in dead pieces of wood and then hollowed out trees or wood buildings. And also, another little fun thing that carpenter ants do is they farm, okay? And what do they farm? It's not like a fungi like leafcutter ants. It's not like actual plants. It's aphids. So if you don't know what an aphid is, it's little things like little bugs that like to go on the stems or leaves of plants, and then they drink the like fluid from the leaf. They'll like pinch into the leaf and start eating the fluid. So the ants will protect these aphids from predators, and then while the aphid excretes a sugary fluid called honeydew. This honeydew is then eaten by the ants. So the ants will stroke the aphid, which then causes them to secrete this honeydew. So pretty cool that ants actually farm. Then the fungus may parasitize other closely related species of ants. So they might not just stay on carpenter ants. They might go to other ants, like I think there's pharaoh ants. There's lots of other ants, with lesser degrees of host manipulation. So they might not be able to completely control the ant, but they might be able to do enough to have reproductive success. Like the ant might not be able to get up to a high place and attach to a leaf, but they might be able to get to a place that is high enough that it can release the spores to still infect other ants. So, this fungus species produces some products, okay? So, this is where I said we were going to go over some of the enzymes that are used to pierce the exoskeleton. So, we have chitinase, we have lipase, and then we have protease, okay? These are enzymes used to pierce the exoskeleton whenever the spores attach to the ant. Then we have sphingosine, and then I'm going to try to say this as best I can, is guanidinobutyric acid, or GBA. I'm just going to use GBA. These are identified as responsible for the manipulation of the host brain. So these two are what causes kind of the zombie aspects of the ant. Then we have hypoxanthine here that has deleterious effects on the neural tissues of the cerebral cortex, and then also alters the motor neurons of the ant. So, our GBA and sphingosine there, it manipulates the brain, okay? The hypoxanthine here does the motor moving stuff. Then there's also a decrease in leucine concentrations and mitochondrial number, which this results in a prevention of muscle regeneration and then also a reduction in energy and calcium levels because the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Less energy, well, less mitochondria, less energy. So there are also medicinal potential for these fungi. So they produce various known secondary metabolites. So the first being naphthalene derivatives. In addition to having the anti-malarial activities on 6 secondary metabolites, they have been demonstrated to have anti-cancer and antibacterial activity. So this has anti-cancer and antibacterial activities. So you can understand why that would be medicinal potential. Then also there's a red pigment in it that has studied as a dye for food, cosmetic, and then also pharmaceutical manufacturing processes. Then we have polyketides. They have been used in antibiotics such as patulin, cholesterol medications such as compactin, and then also antifungal treatments. They also have been reported to have therapeutic effects such as anti-tumor, antioxidant, and then also anti-aging activities. So this helps with cholesterol, antibiotics, and then also antifungal, while also having anti-tumor, antioxidant, and anti-aging activities. So there are quite a few different ways that this could be used medically. But this is not like a end be all of ants, because the fungi also has a hyperparasite. So this means that there is a parasite that parasitizes the parasite. So this fungi we can see as a parasite, okay? There is another parasite that likes to kill it. So the hyperparasite refers to an organism that parasitizes another parasitic organism, like I said. So this fungi that we're talking about here suffers from an unidentified fungal hyperparasite. We do not know what the Ophiocordyceps hyperparasite is, but it's reported as the anti-zombie fungus. Anti-zombie fungus. That's kind of fun to say. And it results in only 6 to 7% of the spores to be viable. So if this basically infects one of the fungi for the Ophiocordyceps, it instantly brings down the viability of these spores to 6 or 7%. The hyperparasite moves in to attack the Ophiocordyceps as the fungal stalk emerges. So it only actually goes whenever the ant is dead and it is stuck to the leaf, and then the fungal stalk is starting to emerge, which can then stop the stalk from releasing its spores. So if you don't like the Ophiocordyceps, then this hyperparasite, whatever it, I'm sure they'll find it out in the future, but whatever it is a good thing. So, host adaptation. So, these ants do not like to be parasitized by this fungi, understandably. So, they have different ways to try to protect themselves. One of these being that the ants will clean each other's exoskeletons, which decreases the presence of spores attachment. So the ants will clean each other. So like whenever you go into it, like before they go into a nest, or possibly while they're just walking around, another ant, if it sees a spore on them, or it'll check them over, if kind of like if you're checking yourself for ticks, or you had someone else check yourself for a tick. So the ants can sense that another member of the colony is infected because they're acting weird and stuff like that. So the healthy ants will carry the infected individual away from the colony to avoid exposure to the spores. So the ants sit there and it's like, hey, this Fred over there, Fred ant, okay? He's acting kind of weird, moving around weird. He's got these spores all over him. I think we need to move him away. So they just carry him off, and so he will not infect any of the extra colony members. So then also there is avoidance. So they will avoid going onto the forest floor as much as they can. This is used as a defense method. So these carpenter ants will build their nests high up in the canopies of the trees, and then they'll use aerial trails, or they'll like walk from leaf to leaf or branch to branch, so that they do not have to go on the forest floor where the spores are more likely to be. So there are a few different popular media or movies, games, and whatnot that have Ophiocordyceps as a enemy, I guess you could say. So one of them being the most well-known, I'm sure everyone has heard of, is The Last of Us. So The Last of Us, in that world, Ophiocordyceps has evolved to infect humans, thus creating a zombie-like enemy. Then there's also the girl with all the gifts, which the cordyceps is able to infect the human population through exchange of bodily fluids. Still zombie-like. Then also a game that I've played on this channel is Cult of the Lamb. So Sozo there is implied to be under the influence of a parasitic fungus, and he has a mushroom growing out his head. And at one point, he'll actually die, and his head will burst, and the mushroom will like release spores. But anyways, the fungus, the mushroom that's growing out of his head, causes him to act erratically and obsess over hallucinogenic mushrooms. So those are three very like somewhat well known, I guess you could say. I know Last of Us and Cult of the Lamb is probably well known. The Girl with All the Gifts I've watched, but it wasn't as interesting. So, one thing you might be asking yourself is, oh my gosh, this can infect ants. What if it can affect humans? Well, can it infect humans first off? No. There has not been any, like, ability for it to, like, there's never been any case of it infecting humans. It is highly specialized since it only affects a limited range of insects, mostly just carpenter ants, or sometime other ants of the, like, close relation. So it's unlikely that this will ever mutate to infect humans. Am I saying it's impossible? No, I'm not saying that. Because the more us humans go into like jungles and stuff like that and destroy the environment, we get into the proximity of all these different viruses, bacteria, fungi, and stuff like that. It's possible that it could eventually like evolve to kind of infect humans, but I don't think it would be to the effect that it would with the ants. And no Ophiocordyceps species have invaded any fish, amphibian, or mammals. It's been mostly just, well, it's just been limited to insects. So there's nothing you have to worry about there. So that is Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, okay? That is the zombie ant fungus. And I think that was a pretty perfect one to have during October season since zombies are kind of seen as a scary, not really quite Halloween aspect, but horror. That and with The Last of Us and stuff like that, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of cordyceps. So I thought this would be a good thing to kind of add in there and teach you some things about it, and also make it so you're not as afraid of Ophiocordyceps, okay? I mean, I don't see them ever infecting humans. Like I said, not impossible, but not probable at all. So anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this educational video. I hope you learned about ants and then fungi, and I hope you just enjoyed. So anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you guys next month on the next educational video. So, bye-bye.